Welcome back. Thanks so much for coming back for the second part of the Hip Hop Symposium. For the next talk, we're going to have Shara McHayle and Vicky Toback in conversation with Elizabeth Way about hip-hop jewelry in a socio-political context. Shara McHale's fashion career began in the early 1990s, directing the marketing and sales strategy of PNB Nation, the first statement-driven streetwear brand. McHayle launched Hoop 88 Dreams with her daughter in 2019, an e-commerce platform that specializes exclusively in hoop earrings. Proving that the world is yours, McHayle draws on the intrinsic nature of hip-hop and continues to bet on herself and the culture that raised her. Vicky Toback is an author, journalist, and curator. She's the author of critically lauded books Contact High, A Visual History of Hip-Hop, which is Clarkson Potter Random House, 2018, and Ice Cold, A Hip-Hop Jewelry History, Lux with Taschen, 2022. Her work has appeared in many publications, including Complex, Rolling Stone, Paper, Vibe, and ID. She's lectured widely about music photography and contemporary culture. Once more, I want to point out that some of the pictures may be in copyright fair use, so try not to take pictures just of the images on the screen, but also including the speakers. And now, please join me in welcoming Shara McHayle, Vicky Toback in conversation with Liz Way.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us back for our afternoon session, and thanks so much, Val. Today, well, this afternoon, I am in conversation with two absolute experts in hip-hop jewelry. And I'm constantly astounded that you guys didn't study this formally. But I'm also going to flip through some images so you can see examples of their beautiful work. But I want to start with, why is jewelry important in hip-hop style and culture? So either whoever would like to jump in first.
For me, and from my point of view, I see it to be extremely important because it's an identifier. It is the thing that separates you from everyone else. It's the thing that you wear and someone totally gets you, you know? And the culture itself, they wanted that, you know? I feel like that was just an instinct, you know, just being invisible for a very, very long time, and then having the opportunity to have money, and that was always the first purchase, to say, I've arrived, yeah.
No, I mean, that's exactly right. And I'll just add, you know, jewelry, like, so many people know the sound of hip hop, but what did it look like? And, you know, the clothing, the jewelry, how you carried yourself was just an integral part of it. Jewelry is really interesting, though, because it does have all its own very specific production values, and, you know, jewelers, like just like Dapper Dan to clothing, there were specific jewelers, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it's deep, you know, and just like the topic of diamonds and gold and commodities and the history of, you know, African American culture, and like that, when you really start to peel back the layers on top of what Shara said, you know, coupled with identity, it is so much more than just conspicuous consumption or bling.
Absolutely. You know, in my kind of looking at older, like 19th century Black communities and the ways that we were restricted from buying land and things, and how our wealth was invested in movable goods. And that's something that goes back to so many communities historically, and jewelry is such an important part of that. So I wanted to ask you both about your personal connection to jewelry. So each of you have kind of done massive personal projects that center around jewelry. So what inspired you to go into design or to write your book?
I'll go first. So, you know, I usually, when people say, like, how did you get into hip hop? I usually start with, you know, my family moved to Detroit when I was 5. We were an immigrant family, a city that was just rooted in music and style, too. And we could do a whole symposium on Detroit style, what up, though? But, so that was so I fell in love with hip hop during all of that, and that was also my entryway into like learning about what America was, because my family was not, we moved from Kazakhstan. And so I knew, like in my teen years, I was like, I'm gonna move to New York and be part of this amazing thing that's happening, which is what I did. Early 90s, I landed in New York. I got a job at a label called Payday Records Empire Management. We had Gangstar, Jay-Z for his first singles deal. And so was really like in the thick of what was happening, and also worked a night job at this club called Nell's. And yes, so like that was where Biggie shot his Big Papa video, and that was really what it was like on many nights. And you saw kind of in the real world, this is before social media, who could wear certain jewelry in the real world, right, out in the street. And it wasn't always like the rappers, it was the street elite, as I like to call them, and the hustlers, and so I got really immersed and had like a lived experience living that. But I'll just quickly add, because I know we don't have a lot of time, with jewelry specifically, there's there's always little neighborhood jewelry stores wherever, you are, the Coliseum Mall, Albee Square Mall here. But in Detroit, we had this place called Northland Mall, which was near my house. And when I was really young, my mom went and bought me, like, we had no money, but she bought me a little Nefertiti pendant, of all things, which, is so specific to, hip-hop culture and, just Afrocentric culture, but she bought it for me, and she passed away when I was really young, and I never asked her, like, why that Nefertiti pendant, and I think it might just been because this jewelry store was in our neighborhood. So I started wearing it writing this book. Like, I had never really worn it. So just a meaningful, like, personal connection for me, too, which was
I mean,
nice.
the amazing thing about jewelry is that everyone has a story.
Yes.
Every piece has a story. But you, Shara, have been in hip-hop fashion from the beginning with PNB Nation. Why jewelry? Why expand in that direction?
Well, as I said, it was a great identifier for me. And my first introduction to jewelry was through hip hop. It was in the early 80s. I didn't even have my ears pierced, okay? So the girls that we were calling fly girls, I mean, I was just sitting there watching them go by, walking by. I'm like, wow, this is amazing, And at that time, I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up with my mom and my brother, and we grew up in the housing projects in Brooklyn. And there was the block parties. There were all these things. And my mom, I'm half Chinese and half black. So my mom was raising me, and I started saving my money and buying hoop earrings because I was claiming my identity, and I didn't even know that I was doing that at the time. I was just gravitating to these like big, ostentatious hoops, and I wanted the rope chain, and I wanted everything that correlated with the music because it was really telling a story about what I was witnessing, and I couldn't, like, I was trying to wrap my arms around my own identity, and she hated it. She was just like, I don't know what you're doing, like, I don't know what this means, and I was like, but it feels really good, and it feels really familiar. And I couldn't really put my finger on it until I was like a grown adult and saying, wow, is this the cognitive, like, memory reflex that's in my blood that I can't even identify? And what she did, she was really clever. She hated it so much that she waited for me to do something wrong. So the thing that for me was breaking curfew. And I broke curfew just to go to the clubs. And I couldn't even make it into the club because my curfew was like 11, 12. It was insane, right? And I lived in Coney Island. So that's the last stop on every train. It takes you about an hour and 15 minutes to get to the city. I wanted to go to the Roxy's. I wanted to go to Latin Quarters. I wanted to go to the fun. And I would just make it just to sit there. I didn't even get into the club because I knew I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't get out, and get out meaning I wouldn't want to leave.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of observing the culture and trying to make sense out of it for me, but it was more fashion. It was more, and they were identifiers. I was like, oh, she's fly. Oh, she goes with so-and-so. And it was about street culture because they had the money first. So I grew up in the 80s, and so you had the mayor, and I love hip hop, right? I mean, I grew up, it's like my big brother, right? And you think that Cindy Campbell, right, Kool Herc's sister in the 70s, decided to throw a party and ask her brother to DJ so she could buy school clothes. So if you put it all in context, you think in 1970s and you say like there was no money, the Bronx was burning, and Coney Island was not as we know Coney Island today. So you would have Mermaid Avenue and all the buildings were burnt out and the Bronx, was burning. You had the war on and the attack on the Black Panthers. You had the Vietnam War ending at that time, and the veterans were returning to what? Inflation, unemployment, and an addiction to heroin, right? And then on the other side, you had the dominant caste, with white flight and able to enjoy pop art, able to enjoy disco music and cocaine. And so when you go to the 80s, and this is when I was coming of age, so I was a kid in the 70s, just by the way. So, but in the 80s, that's when it was about my identity, and my mom couldn't really help me with that. To a degree. And hip hop really was the unifier for me, and the people who were wearing it really spoke to me, and that cognitive memory.
What I love about both of your stories is the idea of Americanness. And like, what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be Black American? But what does it mean to be American? And what is this culture that has been globalized, that is everywhere, but it all comes back to these objects that we can have these stories about. So I want to ask each of you, how have you seen hip-hop jewelry styles evolve over the last 50 years? And what do these changes mean in a wider kind of hip-hop context or a wider American context?
It's evolved a lot as much as the social and political climate has evolved. It's our way of communicating. And Vicki was able to really articulate that in her book, and it's amazing. The book is on my coffee table, I told her. And, you see where, there was this increase in cocaine in the 80s, and then all of a sudden crack emerged, and jewelry really shifted from the 70s to the 80s, right? So you had, Angela Davis, you had all of the great activists wearing hoop earrings, but they were smaller, maybe larger, silver, gold. You go to the 80s, and then, your friend who was in junior high school, who was bagging groceries, all of a sudden was a drug dealer. You know what I mean? Because it was so accessible. It was the first time in American history that Black and brown people had access to money, to make money in a very short period of time. And the first thing that would happen was that you get just jewelry, and it was a statement piece. And we were employing jewelers. Like, we were like, okay, I want a Mercedes-Benz medallion, you know what I mean? Because or we would attribute to success. You would get the car, you get the medallion, and the jeweler, like, I want Mercedes-Benz piece, and he's cranking them out, because once you wear it, or the drug dealer or the hip-hop artist in the 80s, because, as crack cocaine was emerging, the golden era of hip-hop was also emerging at the same time. So it was this cross-pollination of style and influence that was happening. And then you go into the 90s, and then you have like the emergence of native tongue, and then, you know, you have apartheid, and that was happening in the first couple of years, and then it ended in like 94. And then you have middle-class blacks, right, that would also wear, you know, truck jewelry. That's what we coined it, right? And then it was this awakening of, you know, positive rap lyrics, middle class. I really didn't have that experience. And then it was about the Afrocentrism that entered, and then it shifted. It was like black medallion, no gold, right? And you would see, you know, leather medallions. You would gravitate to silver and wear beads, because the understanding was that if you sourced your gold in Africa, then it's like it's not cool, because something's happening over there. So we were always expressing ourselves, and then you go into the 2000s, and it's like we've arrived. Hip hop is now, you know, have robust business in music and television and fashion, and you had the height of Bad Boy, right? And it was like this bling, right?
Label chains started popping up, and now the rock chain, Cash Money, all of it.
Right, and then you can identify crews. And then again is the great identifier. If you're down with Rockefeller and you got signed, you got a Rockefeller, you know, chain and medallion. Of Rough Riders, you had Bad Boy. And so you can identify groups within hip hop music through their jewelry as well.
Well, and then also, you know, you said the American dream, you know, just like with fashion, a lot of mainstream jewelers, the luxury houses, right, the Cartiers and the Tiffany, just like mainstream fashion wasn't really, you know, trying to get hip hop to wear its clothes back then, there emerged a subset of jewelers that really catered to hip hop. And they themselves were largely immigrants as well. If you think about, you know, Canal Street, if you think about the Diamond District, I think that the jewelers like Tito Caicedo, who, you know, made Biggie's Jesus Piece among many other early things, Jacob the jeweler, Aviani and Co., you know, ASAP Eva now. There was something that, you know, they were servicing, just like DAP was making clothes that, you know, had that feeling of customization and remixing that clothing did. They were doing the same thing for the jewelry, and the styles kind of, you know, changed with that. Of course, the one thing that was missing was black and brown jewelers and women jewelers, which I think is really exciting right now, which is really changing, right? It's a really hard business to get into because you need the capital and and also it's an apprenticeship built business. So that culture of, you know, mentorship and apprenticeship, you know, in the jewelry world is really, really important too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to your point, that it is very interesting because it's families. And when I got into the business, it was like, you know, they were really honest with me. They was like, well, Shara, you might have a little bit of it might be a little difficult for you because you're a woman, you're identified as a black woman, and your family line, we can't trace you. We can't, you know, and it goes back to the history of African Americans specifically, where we can't really trace all the way back. We don't have those generations of, you know, accountability as citizens, right, and not as slaves. And so, yeah, Vicki, to your point, it's a little difficult. And so, but we, you know, in the same breath, we were able to create style, and we were able to allow those immigrants to create a life for themselves in the United States by offering what we thought was cool and was status symbols, and said, make it for us. And then everybody else kind of wanted it as well. Yeah.
It's a real beautiful kind of statement about communities coming together and like being creative and, you know, contributing in all these different ways. I want to ask each of you about your favorite moment in hip hop jewelry and what impact did it have on you personally?
I go
first?
Gosh, I get asked this question a lot, like, what is your favorite piece of all time? And I usually say the Biggie Jesus piece, only because that was made sort of by hip hop's first jeweler, Tito Caicedo. It meant, people were wearing Jesus pieces before Biggie, even in hip hop, Lord Finesse, and but really, and even like in Latino culture, that was a big thing. So I usually say that, but today I'm gonna say my favorite moment was probably when Pharrell started being really experimental in the 2000s by using like colored gemstones, different cuts, because I am really interested in that moment we're seeing now, even like when anything goes and hip hop has so much freedom. It's such an expansive thing now where, there aren't just like a couple different styles, that he really opened the door, I think, to a lot of experimentation, which, I think was definitely a turning point.
I mean, certainly a fashion tastemaker in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I don't really particularly have a favorite moment, but to Vicky's point, I think when I look at Pharrell, I look at how successful we are, how many areas of influence we actually have so that we can access those different gems, right? And again, I think that's just all his intuition. That's all of him saying like, this really feels good and familiar, and flipping it, but it's still super big and ostentatious is a huge statement. But if I really dig down deep, I have so much gratitude for hip hop, right? And even how it had informed my style and jewelry style. I mean, it was those girls and those hoop earrings that made me want to go and get my ears pierced, right? And I remember being on the bus going to high school, and it was this girl, and she had a sheepskin coat on, and it was floor length, and she had the hat, and her name was Samantha. And I knew her name was Samantha because she had nameplate earrings, and it was S-A-M-A-T-A. I mean, it was long. I was like, all right, girl, And I mean, I didn't speak to her because she was like way too, I was like, I felt like out of my league, And I was always observing. And that is when I said, oh, I want, S-H-A-R-A. I'm gonna get my nameplate. And that, I think for me, was a moment that shifted how I looked at jewelry as I won't say who I am, you'll just know who I am.
I
was just going to say one fun moment for me, actually, when I was at Mopop, we were installing Contact High, and Adiri took me through their archives and pulled out the Tretch, Tretch from Naughty by Nature used to wear a lock. And so many pieces in hip hop, like one question I asked, like, where is it? Where is the Biggie Jesus piece? Where is the, and that was such a fun moment because I was like, oh, it's here in Seattle. There it is. Yeah.
Emil this morning was talking about that first cover of Vibe. He's wearing that in that photograph.
Yep,
yeah.
That's right.
I just wanted to add that Shara's nameplate earrings are in the exhibition across the street. And I want to ask you both, what predictions for the future do you have about hip-hop jewelry in terms of style evolutions or impact on mainstream culture? You're obviously in the business of jewelry. How do you see it kind of evolving in the future?
When I look at the last 20 years, and it looked like we enjoyed Barack's presidency, and we survived Trump's presidency and insurrection, right? And then we have this immediate gratification in terms of watching things and seeing things on our phone and George Floyd, all of that stuff that was happening. One of the biggest things for me when you ask that question is appreciation versus appropriation, right? And then the Underground Rumble and Dapper Dan, re-emerging like the godfathers of streetwear, and I just feel like everything's going to return back, and you see it returning, but reimagined, right? So if you talk about the classic bamboo hoop, and now you see women wearing it wrapped in leather and, doing other designs to a classic shape that came from the 80s, I feel like it's just adding on to these styles and reimagining them based on what's happening, in the world today.
Vicki, you are a documenter of this. What do you see for the future?
Yeah, well, style-wise, Shara put it best. I'll just add, you're seeing things like pearls for men, and you're seeing really short, like choker-style necklaces, which are kind of, different ways of wearing it. I know a lot of like old heads are like, you can't wear your chain that high, but I'll kind of flip it to also the business side of what I'm seeing. You see Jay and Beyonce as the front people for Tiffany & Co. A$AP Ferg was named the first hip-hop ambassador for Tiffany & Co. You see their recent collection is like very like reminiscent of like hip-hop. And, all across the board, LVMH, Pharrell was just named the men's designer at LVMH, Louis Vuitton. And so I'm really interested in seeing not just how the trends evolve, but sort of we're at this moment where hip-hop clothing was, not too long ago, are the FUBUs and the cross colors and the April Walkers of the jewelry world going to take over this moment, and how will they do that? Shara, yourself included in that, or will the luxury houses sort of, run with it? So I'm more, as a journalist, watching to see that's I mean, it's not a trend, but it is a business trend, I guess, that I'm really kind of watching carefully.
That's interesting that you mentioned the pearls, right? Because I can draw a line to, the LGBT community, you know what I mean? And, being able to be okay with wearing pearls, men wearing pearls and wearing pink and just dressing up, and wearing
Shout out
purses.
Cameron.
Yeah. But and that we continue to have access and to explore, and I think that's very hip hop, to sample, right? When it comes from the music to clothing, and saying, that's not for me, but I'm gonna find a way that it could be for me. And, that will continue. I just thought that was interesting, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys both so much for this fascinating conversation. We could talk about jewelry all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
And of course, Vicki's book, please say the name of your book and where people can get it.
It's called Ice Cold, A Hip-Hop Jewelry History. It's available everywhere books are sold, and including the FIT shop.
In
right?
the bookstore,
Yeah,
yes,
in the
our bookstores
bookstore,
on
yeah.
27th and 8th. And please tell people where they can find Hoop 88 Jeans.
Hoop88dreams.com is an e-commerce platform that specializes exclusively in hoop earrings. And my mom created a monster. Yeah.
Thank you both so much.